Elias Cruz was a soldier-turned-mastermind, Victor, Ghost. Molina was his invisible blade, and Carmen Reyes was the silent brain behind the money. But together, they built the most feared and hated gang California had ever seen. What began as a disciplined operation in East LA evolved into a criminal empire that controlled streets, silenced witnesses, and outsmarted the law, until betrayal, ambition, and one fatal mistake brought it all crashing down. In the decaying neighborhoods of East Los Angeles during the early 2000s, a new kind of gang was born. One that didn't rely on reckless violence or flashy street presence. They called themselves the Red Vultures, and their rise was so fast, so silent, and so methodical that by the time the city realized what had happened, they were already too powerful to stop. At the center of it all was Elias Cruz, a man who stood apart from the usual gang leaders. Elias had served 4 years in the Marine Corps before being dishonorably discharged for assaulting a commanding officer. Hardened by war, intelligent, and unemotional, Elias returned to his old East LA neighborhood not looking for revenge, but with a vision. The vision wasn't just about power, it was about permanence. Elias didn't want the Red Vultures to be another street crew burned out by rivalries and police pressure. He wanted a criminal empire that moved like a business, made money like a corporation, and punished betrayal like a war machine. He started small. Using contacts from his military days, he obtained illegal firearms, not to sell, but to trade for loyalty. He offered protection to struggling local businesses, demanding a monthly insurance fee in return for safety. The difference was, he actually delivered on the promise. Vandals stopped showing up, petty thieves stayed away, and rival gangs mysteriously backed off. Word spread fast. Elias wasn't playing the same game as everyone else. As he built his inner circle, Elias handpicked people who were skilled and efficient, not loud or reckless. Victor, Ghost, Molina was his first lieutenant. Known for his eerie ability to disappear after pulling off violent hits, Ghost was quiet and terrifyingly efficient. His loyalty to Elias was absolute. Then came Carmen Reyes, a financial genius who ran a high-end hair salon by day and laundered dirty money by night. She managed the flow of cash with such precision that the Red Vultures avoided detection for years. Every dollar that came from drug deals, robberies, or extortion was passed through multiple clean channels before it ever touched a bank account. Carmen's systems were airtight. The early operations focused on taking over minor drug routes and side hustles, low risk, high profit. Elias avoided turf wars and gang rivalries at first, using bribes instead of bullets. He paid off mid-level cops, court clerks, even parole officers. While other gangs were busy tagging walls and fighting over corners, the Red Vultures were buying silence and building infrastructure. Their growth was slow, deliberate, and almost invisible. The first real sign of their power came when a rival gang, the Locos Tres, attempted to push into Red Vultures' territory. Elias didn't retaliate with a shootout. He sent Ghost. 3 days later, the Locos leader was found in an alley, bound with duct tape and shot twice in the head. No witnesses. No suspects. Just the image of a Red Vulture spray painted above the body. That single act of precision violence sent a ripple through East LA. The Red Vultures weren't loud, but they were lethal. And they never struck twice. They didn't need to. Within a year, several small crews voluntarily folded into Elias's network. He allowed them to operate under the Red Vultures banner as long as they followed strict rules: no drug use, no unnecessary killings, no drawing heat. Those who disobeyed were removed quietly. The Vultures didn't just kill, they erased. The combination of military discipline, financial savvy, and cold-blooded enforcement made the Red Vultures unlike anything the city had seen. They weren't just a gang, they were a system. And as they spread through the suburbs and city streets, fear followed. Not because they were everywhere, but because no one could tell where they would strike next. The event that would catapult the Red Vultures into infamy happened on a warm July night at the edge of the San Pedro docks. It was supposed to be a clean exchange, one that had been negotiated quietly over weeks. A shipment of high-grade firearms was arriving by boat from Baja California, smuggled in by the powerful Mexican syndicate known as Los Padrinos. The Red Vultures had promised payment in full, cash delivered on site, no tricks, no heat. At least that was what Los Padrinos believed. But Elias Cruz had no intention of paying. He saw the deal as a chance to both arm his gang and weaken a rival in one calculated blow. Elias had chosen the location carefully, an abandoned warehouse close to the docks, just remote enough to avoid witnesses, just close enough to the water to make escape easy if needed. He sent Victor, Ghost, Molina, and Ramiro Stacks, Delgado to oversee the operation. Stacks was Elias's newer lieutenant, younger and more impulsive than Ghost, but loyal and aggressive, a combination Elias believed would be useful that night. The warehouse was dark, humid, and empty when the two sides met. The crates were opened, the guns were confirmed, but the cash never came. Instead, Ghost gave a silent signal. What followed lasted less than 60 seconds. The Vultures had hidden shooters stationed on the rafters above the warehouse floor. As soon as the deal was confirmed, bullets rained down. There were no warnings, no chances to fight back. 12 members of Los Padrinos were killed where they stood. 2 tried to run. They were chased down and executed. When it was over, Ghost calmly walked to the center of the warehouse, pulled out a can of red spray paint, and marked a single vulture silhouette on the wall beside the largest bloodstain. It was Elias's trademark, a sign that the job had been done to his standards. By the time authorities discovered the massacre the next morning, the weapons were gone, the bodies were cold, and not a single piece of forensic evidence was left behind. The story exploded in the media. Police tried to connect it to the usual suspects: cartel wars, gang retaliation, or internal betrayal. But behind the scenes, Los Padrinos knew exactly who was responsible. They had been humiliated, disarmed, and outsmarted. Retaliation came swiftly and violently. Within days, gunfire lit up the streets of East L.A. Again and again, associates of the Red Vultures were targeted, lookouts, runners, even family members. Elias had expected this. What Los Padrinos didn't know was that he had already begun preparing for war. Carmen Reyes rerouted the gang's funds into new safe houses and arms caches. Ghost responded with precision hits of his own, taking out 3 Padrinos lieutenants in less than 2 weeks. The streets became a chessboard soaked in blood. But then, as quickly as the violence escalated, it stopped. No one understood why. The shooting halted. The streets grew quiet. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed Elias had been killed. Others claimed Los Padrinos were regrouping for a final assault. But the truth was more chilling. Elias had done the unthinkable. He had negotiated a secret truce with the very people he had double-crossed. No one knew how, but one by one, the leaders of Los Padrinos began to vanish. Some were arrested on anonymous tips. Others were found dead in remote desert towns, far from any Red Vultures territory. The syndicate slowly collapsed from within, like it had been poisoned from the top down. The San Pedro massacre had changed everything. It transformed the Red Vultures from a local gang into a criminal force feared across the state. Elias Cruz had proved he could not only outgun his enemies, he could outthink them. The message was clear across the Red Vultures, and you wouldn't just lose the fight, you'd disappear. The Red Vultures became a ghost story in law enforcement circles, an invisible empire that seemed immune to prosecution. The gang operated in silence, leaving behind no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no evidence. For years, authorities failed to crack their network. Cases collapsed. Surveillance yielded nothing. Informants either refused to talk or turned up dead. It seemed that the Red Vultures had insulated themselves with such precision that even the FBI began to doubt whether they could ever be brought down. That was until a man who had never been involved in crime unwittingly became the gang's biggest threat. He was known in court documents only as Patient Zero. A quiet, middle-aged hospital janitor named Julian Mendez, working the night shift at a private clinic in Glendale. He had no criminal record, no gang ties, and no reason to suspect that his routine cleaning job would make him a target of one of California's most feared gangs. One night, he was mopping a hallway outside the emergency operating room when he heard voices, low, panicked, and unfamiliar. The doctors weren't on duty. He peeked through the door and saw two masked men surrounding a wounded man lying on a gurney. The injured man had a gunshot wound to the side and was losing blood fast. Julian didn't know it at the time, but the man being treated was Elias Cruz himself. He had taken a bullet during a failed raid in South Gate and couldn't go to a hospital without risking arrest. Carmen Rise had arranged for a trusted underground surgeon to meet them at the private clinic after hours. Ghost was there too, watching the door. But something had gone wrong. They hadn't expected a janitor to still be working. Julian hid and listened. He memorized details out of fear, names, instructions, threats. Over the next few days, Julian debated going to the police. He thought about staying silent, about quitting his job and disappearing. But the fear didn't fade, and his conscience wouldn't let him ignore what he had heard. He contacted an anonymous tip line. Within hours, the FBI pulled him into protective custody. The information he provided was more detailed than anything they'd ever had. He knew the surgeon's name, the location of several Vultures safe houses, and even mentioned a hidden room in Carmen Reyes's salon where financial records were kept. Investigators were stunned. They had stumbled onto a gold mine. The FBI moved quickly. A task force was formed. Surveillance was increased. Warrants were issued. For the first time, law enforcement believed they had the upper hand. Patient Zero became the key witness in a secret indictment against Elias and his core members. But then, just 3 days before the trial, everything fell apart. Julian's safe house, located in a remote part of Ventura County, exploded in what was initially reported as a gas leak. Fire crews arrived too late. The house was gone. No survivors. Investigators combed through the wreckage and found a charred body, assumed to be Julian's. More alarming, they discovered that all physical files relating to his testimony, notes, transcripts, and digital backups, had been either destroyed in the fire or corrupted. The case collapsed instantly. Without Julian's live testimony, the charges couldn't stick. Elias Cruz walked out of custody without ever seeing a courtroom. The message was devastating. If even a protected federal witness couldn't be kept alive, what hope did anyone else have? Inside the criminal world, the legend of the Red Vultures grew darker. No one could explain how they had found Julian. No one claimed responsibility. But the outcome was undeniable. The only man brave enough to stand against the Red Vultures had been erased, and with him, the best shot anyone ever had at taking the gang down. Carmen Rise had once been the quiet backbone of the Red Vultures, calm, clever, and fiercely loyal. She wasn't just good at hiding money. She was the reason Elias Cruz's empire survived as long as it did. While others made noise in the streets, Carmen worked in silence, creating a vast web of offshore accounts, shell companies, and legitimate businesses that masked the gang's criminal profits. Her upscale salon in East Los Angeles was more than just a front. It was a fortress of financial activity. Cash from extortion, drugs, and arms flowed through it daily, transformed into clean profits, reinvested into properties, and buried under layers of fake paperwork. Her system was so effective that federal auditors couldn't detect a single suspicious transfer for nearly 6 years. But power, even when invisible, becomes dangerous when it begins to shift. Elias Cruz, once trusting of Carmen, had grown increasingly paranoid. As the gang expanded and violence escalated, he began fearing betrayal more than enemies. And Carmen, without intending to, gave him a reason to doubt her. She had become cautious, asking fewer questions about Elias's orders, requesting more autonomy over the financials, and traveling more frequently without explanation. Elias noticed every detail. He began to suspect that Carmen was building an escape plan. He was right. Carmen had quietly been preparing to disappear. She had seen the pressure mounting, law enforcement raids growing bolder, informants disappearing, Elias taking bigger and riskier steps. She no longer believed in the future of the Red Vultures. Her plan was meticulous. She created 2 identities for herself and her teenage son, opened overseas accounts in Belize and Panama, and arranged to purchase property under fake names. She even booked flights from separate cities to avoid detection. What she didn't know was that Elias had already begun monitoring her. A private audit, initiated by Elias and carried out by a new financial advisor loyal only to him, uncovered a gap in the gang's accounts. Over $600,000 had quietly vanished. Carmen hadn't stolen it, she had moved it, piece by piece, to her escape funds. The money had passed through so many channels it was almost untraceable, but it was enough to trigger Elias's fury. He didn't act immediately, he waited. He watched her routine, noted her habits, and analyzed her every move. Then, one night, Carmen closed her salon as usual. She texted her son that she'd be home late. She never arrived. The next morning, the salon didn't open. The lights remained off. Staff tried calling her, but her phone was dead. Neighbors saw nothing unusual. Police were never contacted. Within 24 hours, Carmen Reyes had vanished from Los Angeles without a trace. Rumors filled the vacuum left behind. Some said Elias had ordered Ghost to eliminate her and bury her body beneath the salon's basement floor. Others believed Carmen had anticipated Elias's move and escaped before he could act, vanishing into the Caribbean under her new identity. A third theory suggested she had been taken alive, held somewhere as punishment for her betrayal, kept in a private prison known only to Elias and Ghost. No theory was ever proven. Carmen's son was quietly taken in by a relative and never spoke publicly about her disappearance. What was undeniable was the impact her absence had on the Red Vultures. With Carmen gone, the gang's financial operations began to unravel. Payments were delayed. Shell companies stopped responding. Bribes bounced. Elias brought in new people to manage the books, but none of them matched Carmen's precision. Federal investigators began noticing discrepancies. Unpaid taxes, unfiled forms, and paper trails that should have been invisible started lighting up in databases. For the first time, the Red Vultures looked vulnerable. Not from bullets, but from balance sheets. Carmen Reyes had been the ghost in the wires, the unseen architect of the Vultures' financial empire. Without her, cracks appeared. And through those cracks, law enforcement began to see exactly how the gang had been hiding in plain sight all along. Her disappearance wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was the beginning of the end. The fall of Elias Cruz began not with gunfire, but with paperwork. After Carmen Reyes vanished, the cracks in the Red Vultures' financial structure widened with every passing week. Without her, tax records were neglected, money trails became sloppy, and suspicious transactions began triggering automated red flags in federal databases. The precision that once protected the gang was gone. Elias tried to replace her with 2 separate advisors, but neither understood the web she had spun. Funds went missing. Payoffs to corrupt officials failed. Properties were seized. For the first time, the gang's money wasn't flowing. It was leaking. While Elias struggled to contain the chaos internally, a bigger threat emerged externally. A new federal task force had been assembled, one designed specifically to dismantle the Red Vultures. It was led by Special Agent Nicole Herrera, a relentless investigator who had spent a decade buried in gang crimes. She had failed once before when the witness known as Patient Zero died. But now she had something even more valuable, an opportunity. That opportunity came in the form of Derek, Lil Doom, Alvarez, a reckless and violent recruit Elias had promoted in desperation. Young, unstable, and addicted to power. Lil Doom didn't follow orders. He made headlines. When he shot and killed the nephew of a Los Angeles city councilman outside a Hollywood club, the public outcry was immediate. For the first time, politicians demanded answers. News cameras turned toward the Red Vultures, and the FBI was given full authority to act. The gang was no longer a shadow. It was under a spotlight. Agents raided safe houses, interrogated former associates, and intercepted calls. Surveillance drones were flown over neighborhoods once thought too dangerous to enter. And then Elias made a mistake. He attempted to move a large sum of money, over $4.3 million, through a shell company registered to a deceased person. The transfer was flagged and traced. Within days, the task force located a Vulture's warehouse in Silver Lake that had gone unnoticed for years. They raided it at dawn. Elias was found in a makeshift office, surrounded by maps, hard drives, and a small group of armed men. He didn't resist. By then, he knew the game was over. But the twist came after his arrest. Instead of maintaining the silence he was known for, Elias made a deal. To avoid life in a federal supermax prison, he began cooperating. He provided names, bank accounts, delivery routes, and lists of officers on the gang's payroll. He implicated dozens, some within his own ranks, others in high places. His confessions tore through the remnants of the Red Vultures like fire. Members fled, went into hiding, or turned on one another. Ghost, Elias's most trusted enforcer, disappeared for nearly 2 months before being caught near the Texas border trying to cross into Mexico with a fake passport. He refused to speak a word during interrogation. His silence contrasted sharply with Elias's betrayal. But Elias never got to testify. 2 weeks before the first trial was set to begin, he was found dead in his high-security cell. The official report called it suicide, self-inflicted wounds and a torn bedsheet. But the details didn't add up. His injuries were inconsistent, the security footage had several unexplained gaps, and no guards were present for over an hour. The truth, though never confirmed, was widely accepted someone had gotten to him. Whether it was a former Vulture, a corrupt official he had exposed, or an outside hit remains a mystery. With Elias gone, the task force continued its work, but the heart of the gang had stopped beating. The Red Vultures fractured into isolated cliques, none strong enough to claim dominance. What was once an empire became ruins. And while some members remain free, scattered across the country, the legacy of the Red Vultures endures as a cautionary tale. A gang that rose through silence and fear and crumbled from within.